עיר המחלות, אסענה אל הגרים, מאין יבוא עזרי. עזרי מהם אדוני, עושה שמים וארץ. אל ייתן למות רגלך, אל ינום שומרך. הנה לא ינום ולא ישן, שומר ישראל. אדוני שומרך, אדוני צילך, עליית ימינך. יומם כשמש לא יככה, וירח בלילה. אדוני ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך. אדוני ישמור צאתך ובואך, מעתה ועד העולם.
מזמור לדוד, אדוני מי יגור בעליך, מי ישכון בהר קדשך. הולך תמים ופועל צדק, ודובר אמת בלבבו. לא רגל על לשונו, לא עשה לרעהו רעה, וחרפה לא נשא על קרובו. נבזה בעיניו נמאס, ואת ירא אדוני יכבד, נשבע להרע ולא ימיר. כספו לא נתן בנשך, ושוחד אל נקי לא לקח, עושה אלה לא ימות לעולם. O Lord, who will dwell in your sanctuary? Who will live with you upon your holy mountain? She who lives with integrity, who does what is right, who speaks the truth in her heart, who does not reproach her neighbor. Whoever does these things shall stand firm forever. I had to be careful with this eulogy. I had to be careful that I used the correct grammar and the good syntax. Because how could I write a eulogy for Mary Chaitoff with the poor grammar and bad syntax? I didn't want her to mark me down, to lower my grade. I'll tell you a secret, and I don't want it to get out of this room. People come up to me after I give a talk, and they tell me what they think about it. That's not the secret part. You'd guess that. I appreciate the conversation, but honestly, I don't always evaluate myself because of the way somebody feels about what I've said. When Mary would tell me that was good, it made me feel good. Because I appreciated her mind, and I appreciated her passion, and I appreciated her goals. Mary didn't like sloppy thinking, disorganized thinking. She wanted people to think clearly about their lives and to set goals for themselves. And I mean, first of all, her thousands of students whose lives she touched, whose thinking she influenced, whose impact is still felt years and years later. She pushed and she prodded, she challenged her students, not just to improve their essay, but to improve their lives and their future. We talked about this. My experience is the same as yours. People would come up to me after hearing that the name Mary Chaitoff in the congregation. They say, oh my God, she was my English teacher. She could sometimes be a pain in the neck. But the older I get, the more I realize she was right about everything. And I get it now. And you know what she was right about. Get an education. Keep learning. Set goals. Work hard. Never quit. These were her mantras. And it all adds up to make something better of yourself. And figure out how you're going to get from point A and to point B to point C. Find out your mission and don't waste your time. She sounds like a life coach. Or maybe a football coach. But a great teacher should be a life coach. And it's more than that. Mary was also Jewish. And being Jewish means not only improving myself and improving you, but Jewish is about improving the world. Mary was also aspirational. Mary was impatient, not just with sloppy thinking in her students, but she was impatient with sloppy thinking coming out of politicians and coming out of leaders. And when she heard a speaker or a discussion about world topics or world problems where she felt people weren't being kind or thoughtful or caring, she would bristle. When she felt that self-interest and ego were fueling public debate about the issues of today, she was disgusted. And I think that Mary modeled in her own life the kinds of ideals that we would all do well to emulate in making a larger and better world. I teased you yesterday. I said, did your mom do anything ever that wasn't purposeful? Because she always seemed purposeful with what she did. I know she loved clocks. You counted, 67 clocks? It's probably still counting in your home. Time. She knew life was valuable, and she knew time was valuable. And she knew, and she seemed to know in every activity that she knew there had to be a goal in mind. I could mention working with Beatrice Rabinsky on the trips to the concentration camps, the journey of conscience. Not only would that educate the individual, but it would improve the world because those students would grow up and understand something about life. I know she traveled with your dad to Russia in the 70s to meet with Soviet Jews, to sneak them religious supplies, and the supplies that were banned by the government. But you know what? I don't need to use the most dramatic examples. She reached out to those she saw every day in her corner of the world to try to improve the world. And she realized, yes, that completing an English assignment was not just about the assignment. It was about how that student would approach every single act of responsibility in their life. And those habits had to be shaped right now in her classroom. She was provocative with the students. She said it the way it was. She'd spare no feelings if you felt you needed a wake-up call. In her, 5,000 students, she taught many different cultures, races, different family backgrounds, faiths, in different historical eras of this country. But she was effective because deep down she loved people. She saw the potential in people. She was inspired to go looking for that potential. And she really felt that no matter what your culture, what your race, what your faith, and what historical era, she knew that the cultivation of your mind and your accountability, she insisted that those were universal and timeless values that would help you reach your potential. The story that I thought defined Mary the best was that she and your dad they'd bring home brass. It was ugly, it was dirty, purposeless brass. And she'd work on it, they'd work on it with their own hands, it would become a beautiful chandelier in your home. That's your mom. You find something, you see the potential in it, perhaps even potential no one else can see, or it's just that maybe we're all too lazy to put in the work to bring that potential to its fulfillment, to get off the sofa and do something. But Mary would work on it and produce something purposeful and beautiful. I know that a lot of her human chandeliers have never forgotten her because they all shine today, partly because she took them and worked with them and believed in them. And of course, you may know that the Hebrew word for teacher, morah, is very similar to the word for parent, because a parent's got to teach. And she taught all of you. She modeled for you in her own life the need to keep growing and to keep learning. She was at home when you were younger, but then she went back to school. She earned a bachelor's degree, her master's degree in English. She completed writing her PhD thesis. The image of all of you sitting at the table doing your homework together, hers on the college level or graduate level and yours in wherever you were in school, very appropriate. She was a strong lady, seventh child of 8, Hungarian family. She was the first in this country, first to be born in this country. Books were her inspiration. Books were her refuge, an open door to dreams and goals and ideals. And she was self-driven from a very, very modest upbringing. Mary followed the advice she would later give to her students. Set a goal and work hard and don't stop and find out how you're going to get there. Determined woman. Things had to be done a certain way. But she was an active mother, Girl Scout leader, baked bread, baked cakes, traditional dinner each evening. You talked about the day. A good bowler. She and your dad danced together. In other words, a good social life, good friends, great mom, everything that one might need. And ultimately, though, in their love for each other, she and your dad, the fun they had together, the emotional and physical chemistry of marriage that they had together, because he was a gentle and a stable, a solid man, handsome man who they reveled in their time together. But even in his full life, she had a yearning for more, and he encouraged it. And that's when she went back to school. She had graduated from high school, worked as a bookkeeper. She and your dad had met. She fell in love with him. He had to make time, I guess. She had other things in his social schedule, but he made time. And ultimately, they grew together as a married couple. She had a mission. First, she had to discover it in herself, and then she inspired it in all of you to fulfill her own potential and to help improve the world. Even her hobbies, what you told me, her knitting and her gardening, to make something out of raw material. That's what it is. Create something to fulfill potential. I know she had wonderful individual relationships with each of her grandchildren. She was a role model for all of you as well. In her ability to relate to every age and to every person, and in the mind that never stopped working, and in her teasing, and in her personality, and even in her angst and impatience about current events. In all these things, Mary stayed young. Her body, of course, was breaking down, but in her mind and in her spirit, she was young until she passed away. She kept trying to improve others and herself because that's what a Jew does. She kept trying to reach out to people because that's what a Jew does. She kept coming to shul. She kept coming to shul and kept coming to classes because that's what a Jew does. She substituted in class for others until she was 87 years old. She substituted for others, but honestly, I don't know there's anyone who can substitute for her. She lived with a good name, and she died with a good name. I want to ask, I know that Jeffrey and Linda.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you, Canterbury. Our mother, grandmother, great-grandmother, and aunt. She was a devoted wife. She was a dedicated matriarch. Mom was dynamic. She was proud. Mom was passionate and creative. I recently asked her, I said, Mom, how would you describe yourself? And she said, fun. And I said, oh gosh, Mom, I'd say you're feisty. But she was also a pious woman who loved her family and her extended families and life with fervor. Now, if you knew my mom, you might find it really difficult to believe that when Mary was a little girl, she was very quiet and shy. But she learned a lot by watching her siblings, and she found refuge in reading books and became an unquenchable bookworm that lasted her whole life. While attending Heights High, waiting for her official graduation, Mom took a job as a secretary bookkeeper, and one day when this handsome Jewish scrap dealer walked in, she said, that's it. It wasn't just his good looks. He was a gentleman, very smart, and Dad was a really good dancer. She was totally smitten. But first she had to deal with her future father-in-law. Chaitoff Grandpa wasn't so sure about the supposed Jewish girl named Mary. So he opened up a Siddur, a Jewish prayer book. She read his selection proficiently in Hebrew. Mom was always proud to be Jewish, and Grandpa was really happy to have his first daughter-in-law, even though she was skinny. They married and started their family and eventually bought a lot in South Euclid to build their first home together. And they literally built it together. Mom had a fear of heights. She climbed to the very rafters of that bungalow, and they truly built their first home together on Okolona Road. Dad taught Mom how to drive, and they were living the American dream of the 1950s. They had always hoped for a house in the suburbs with 4 kids, but after I came along, Mom said 3 was enough. When we were small, Mom and Dad started family camping trips. We learned a lot: geography and map reading, nature and teamwork and patience. One time, their 30-foot camper got wedged between two parked cars. I was told it was a nearly impossible tight fit, and a crowd grew, and it became a spectator sport watching Mary successfully guide Harold to get that camper out of the ridiculously tight parking space. I was told that they applauded as they pulled away. The 1960s brought contact lenses. Once Mom got her contacts and gave up her thick glasses, she found a new confidence. Her thirst for education and love of reading led her to college classes to become an English teacher. She eventually, of course you heard, earned her master's and completed her PhD doctoral thesis. And she still managed to schlep us to baseball and football games, baseball, Girl Scouts, dance recitals, Boy Scouts, and art classes at the J. Mom mostly taught in the Cleveland Heights schools. And after 30-plus years and then many years as a substitute, she taught English to over 5,000 students, many of whom we have heard from. I saw her pride when someone would reach out to her years after they graduated, and every year she did receive a phone call on the Ides of March. They thanked her that she didn't teach just mythology, Shakespeare, literature, or grammar. She taught life lessons, and Rabbi was right. They were: get an education and keep learning, set goals for yourself, work hard, never quit, because these were the goals that she set for herself. Mom worked hard. In fact, she worked so hard laying bricks in her backyard, she wore off her fingerprints. You now know the FBI knew all about Mary Chaitoff, because every couple of years she needed to be fingerprinted for her teaching position, and every time she had to deal with law enforcement who could not successfully print her. But Mom had many interests beyond teaching. She loved to knit and crochet. She and Dad enjoyed travel, although I think they liked coming home even better. The two of them loved dancing, foxtrot, and cha-cha, and they were good. It always warmed our hearts to watch them dance together. Gardening was a joy and creative outlet that she inherited and shared. Mom's love of orchids won her many award-winning ribbons, but I'd like to share one story other than her cataloging 400 orchids on her computer. In the 70s, Mom and Dad first saw hydroponic gardening at Disney's Epcot Center. She thought, wow, I can grow tomatoes year-round in the basement. Well, this was before the convenience of an internet search. She contacted the U.S. Department of Agriculture to get as much information as she could about hydroponics. Next thing you know, the Pepper Pike police are knocking at the front door. I guess the only people interested in indoor gardening were growing illegal marijuana, not tomatoes. It didn't take Dad long to talk her out of pursuing that dream. Mom schlepped us to the orchestra, the ballet, and opera. She and Dad both especially loved going to the theater. Without a doubt, Dad and I slept through a good many performances, but we supported her love of the arts in our own unique way. Exercise was a big part of Mom's lifestyle. You can only imagine her jumping around and hooting and howling at JCC aerobics classes, pushing people half her age to keep up and keep moving. She later turned to Peter Lewis for water exercise, and afterward, she would always go to Morning Minyan to get some clarity, say Kaddish, or have a few words with the big guy upstairs, and I'm sure they're talking. Her B'nai Yeshurun Morning Minyan was a very treasured family who she loved and enriched her life. So every day, by the time most of us are crawling out of bed and pouring our first cup of coffee, Mom had already gone to services, worked out, picked up the newspaper, ate a very full and hearty breakfast, and was ready for her daily activities. She's a tough act to follow. Mom was an active participant in several book clubs. It was an opportunity for her to share her love of reading and thirst for knowledge with her need to share her interpretation or opinion. She was always really good at that, wasn't she? She loved the Park Synagogue Book Club and sparring with Rabbi Scoff. I know you appreciated her differences of opinion. She appreciated your mutual respect, especially when you agreed with her. Mom's interests were varied. She could discuss Kafka and the genius of Thomas Wolfe. She could tell you about the tea industry from centuries ago when it began and how the trade expanded to what it is today. She read about the 18th century Austria-Hungary monarchy, noticing many similarities to today's politics. Once, after watching a movie, she was intrigued by the music playing during the ending credits. And next thing you know, Mom's enrolled in a class to learn more about Shostakovich, his life and his works. And you might be curious to know, just as a side note, her favorite book, Nathaniel Hawthorne's House of Seven Gables. Mom opened her home, her table, and her heart to all of us. Sunday brunches were her opportunity to see her grands and great-grands and even showcase a new recipe or two. Passover seders are treasured memories. Her good intentions, her good deeds, her students, they're a part of her legacy, but we cannot forget her mandel bread, her wine nut sponge cake, her zucchini casserole, and we cannot forget Michaela, Stephen, her macaroni and cheese. But with all of the friends, family, students, multiple book clubs, bowling, temple, and lodge affiliations, her Cleveland Clinic family, Mom's priorities were clear. She loved life, and she loved us dearly. Dad, Jeff, Beth, and me too, and our mates Robert, Bruce, and Margot for bringing joy to her life. We cannot forget the 7 grands and 13 greats, so be patient with me. Aaron and Elaine, Jeremy and Meredith, Brian and Lauren, Michelle and Jonathan, Andrew and Tova, Rachel and Mark, Stephen and Brittany. Michaela, Braden, Peyton, Aiden, Harper, Caleb, Haley, Vivian, Juliet, Hunter, Noah, Moshe Aryeh, Yeshaya Lu. She understood us all, maybe even better than we know ourselves in some ways, and she couldn't have loved us more. Over 70 years ago, Mary and Harold had a vision, and it was accomplished. They both worked hard. They appreciated the fruits of their labor. Nothing was handed to them. They were respectable and respected, intelligent, hardworking, and faithful people. And in Mom's case, well, there was just a little Hungarian chutzpah sprinkled in. It was in her blood, and I suppose it's in ours too. And for that, I'm forever grateful and proud to be hers.
Everyone has stories and memories of my mother. I want to share with you a few mother-son conversations and memorable incidents. As you heard, my mother had a green thumb and spent many hours tending to her vegetable garden, flowers, plants, an interest that was passed on to her grandchildren. And as you heard, orchids were her real passion. During a hospital stay, a doctor asked Mom about her hobbies. She told him that she loved orchids, and a big smile came to his face. I happened to see the doctor a few days later. There was some confusion about her name, so I said, "She's the orchid lady." And he nodded. "Oh, yes." She told me she had 50 orchids. Later that day, I saw my mother and said, "Why did you lie to the doctor? You told him you had 50 orchids when, in fact, you have 400. Mom replied, "Well, I didn't want to get the doctor all shook up." My mother was an English teacher and an avid reader of all kinds of books, especially historical novels and aspects of the Holocaust. She read Shakespeare, Hemingway, and others. However, she identified with Charles Dickens, as she also came from a humble beginning. She was a member of 2 book clubs. At one book club, there were 10 people, including the rabbi, that were arguing against my mother and vice versa. The discussions were spirited and serious, but Mary Chaitoff was not one to give in, even though she was outnumbered. She came from a Hungarian family. Hungarians are said to be stubborn. I would ask my mother, "How was the book club? Any arguments? Did you fight with the rabbi again?" The answer, "I do not fight with the rabbis. The rabbis fight with me." 60 years ago, growing up on Okolona in South Euclid was a different era. Women became housewives, nurses, or teachers. It was a segregated society in Cleveland. We had toy guns, slingshots, climbed into attics and on top of garages. We played in backyards, front yards, and in the street. Our gardener was a man from the South. He was uneducated, illiterate, and signed his name with an X. His name was TJ, and we loved him. The neighborhood kids and I used to play ball in the street, and TJ would set down his lawnmower, come out into the street, take a few swings at the bat, throw the football, and then he would go back to work. One hot summer day, TJ forgot to bring his lunch and had nothing to eat. My mother prepared lunch for me and TJ, and we sat at the kitchen table. I was a sheltered kid from the suburbs and wasn't prepared for the scene. TJ's table manners were so poor. Food was flying everywhere, and I was shocked. But I learned a valuable lesson that day from Mom. She demonstrated kindness, and even if people are from a different class or background or less educated, everyone needs to eat, and we all can eat at the same table. At my father's stone setting, I asked my mother if Dad's gravestone was a slightly different shade of gray from all the others. Mom laughed and said, "That's blue granite. You know, your father's favorite color was blue. I paid a little more money for that, but I wanted to make him happy. To me, it looked more gray or tan